4 o'clock, so why don't we get started and people can wander in as they want. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jeff Tobe. I am a professional speaker and author of the book Coloring Outside the Lines. I'm so excited to be at our inaugural meeting, and I'm just going to introduce our panelists, but you're all panelists today. So meaning, as we go through this, it's very informal. Love for you all to participate via the chat box. Just if you have questions or comments, we don't have a lot of people on, so it should be easy to manage. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask Randy to introduce herself.
My name's Randy Timmons.
Oh, no, sorry. Randy, I know you'd love to, but...
Thank you.
You can mute yourself. Good friend of mine, so I can tease him. But Randy, with a B.
Ah.
So we'll introduce our panelists.
Hey, everyone.
Randy?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Brandy Abel. I'm with Tier 1 Performance, and I've been there about 9.5 years. So my background and career is mostly in change management, and I like to say that I've done that for 15 years plus, and how many more plus doesn't really matter after you get to 15. So, and I'm based here in Pittsburgh.
Great. Barry Wolf.
Yeah, hi, my name's Barry Wolf. I've been doing HR consulting for about 2 or 3 years after 30 plus years or so in director and VP levels in private and public global companies, et cetera. And I'm also author of a best-selling book called The Little Black Book of Human Resources Management, and thrilled to be here today. So.
Perfect. Bruce Gay, you have to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Bruce Gay. I'm a senior program manager at UPMC Enterprises. We're the commercialization arm of UPMC. I have about 2 decades worth of project and program management background, and the change management aspects that I'm been working in have been around how do you deploy systems into the hands of clinical specialists. So thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Excellent. Welcome. Conrad Just.
Thanks, Jeff. You almost pronounced it correctly. So Conrad Jooste.
I've never pronounced your last name. I'm sorry.
Jooste. No one can say it. I mean, I should be a Yinzer, but not quite yet. 7 years in Pittsburgh, and the accent clearly hasn't changed. Originally from South Africa, but I work for CGI, and I lead our culture and change management practice. CGI's obviously we're a consultancy that runs nationally, and before that, really, I guess I was the culture guy. So I bring a passion for culture to everything that I do. So trying to bring the people side to a lot of the consulting work we do at CGI.
Great, welcome, Tiffany Brown.
Good afternoon, Tiffany Brown, and I am with SDLC Partners. I am a process improvement consultant and specialist, also a life coach, which is a little different, but I specialize in lean transformations, changing cultures, and really just eliminating waste in existing processes and how to be innovative to create new processes.
I was very excited to hear you were in charge of lean, anything lean. No, sorry. Not related. And finally, our fearless leader, Matt Craig. Matt?
Thank you, Jeff. And I will actually just bring up our material as I do my introduction as well. So let me know when that's up for you guys.
We can see it.
Good. All right. So hi, folks. My name is Matt Craig, and I am an organizational improvement specialist. I bring a lot of different things to the table, but one of the main things I really like doing is working with teams of people to generate sustained organizational change, things that really make a meaningful difference to driving performance of the organization by investing in systems, investing in processes, investing in leveraging technology through teams, through people, through development. So to introduce you a little bit to our group, what I'm going to do is firstly just a couple of little, I won't even call them ground rules, but just some prompts, if you will, to keep in mind. Please do enjoy the session, and please, as Jeff said, be an active participant in this session. You'll always get much more out of these sessions if you engage. You feel free to take yourself off mute and ask a question at any time. But otherwise, please do stay on mute. Sometimes, you know, we all get background noise for different reasons. So try and deal with that. Please allow everyone to have a chance, to have a say, to speak up, make your point. And unlike me, and I'm going to try and keep it down, try not to go on too much. The recording, as Jeff said, will also be available for posterity for everyone to have a look at. So we really all did want to just get a chance to say hello and really just share the essence of our mission with you, which is that change management as either as a profession, like if that's your job, or if that's a part of your job, it's all about helping manage and work with people to make a meaningful difference. And that's what we're here for. So those of us who are part of this panel, we have come together as volunteers to help found the Pittsburgh Change Management Professionals Group. We initially built a group on LinkedIn, and that's running. We have since, in fact, I can go to the next slide. We have since invested in and been building a website. It's relatively bare bones at the moment, but we're going to keep adding to it. And our hope is to truly foster a community of practice where professional change managers and other people who are interested in organizational change and leadership are able to come, share ideas, make connections, network, build a sense of community, and truly get a lot of value in terms of developing professionally and getting really effective tips and tricks that you can put into practice in your work. So please go ahead and visit our website if you haven't seen it. Please join our group on LinkedIn if you haven't done that. And you know, we welcome all comers. We see the need for effective change management to be a very pervasive domain of practice for so many different people, whether you're an executive leader, whether you're someone like an actual change management professional, or maybe you're a project or a program manager or a service management specialist or an enterprise architect, or so many other different roles, a lean person, a process improvement person, a capability person, et cetera, et cetera. The need to be able to manage change is just pervasive. So we hope this is a helpful group. We hope that you join us, and we hope that you become an active participant. And with that, let's get on to today's topic. So we wanted to sort of just frame the context about why are we here? Why are we talking about leadership and influence? And really, you can see here again, back to the essence of change, our mission is to help make others better, right? The influence that we wish to have is to raise the game, to improve the system, to have that influence, to make a difference that lasts. And so therefore, when we're not around, that difference that we've made stays around. So that's the essence of what we're trying to portray today. And we want to really talk and have a discussion about what are some of the challenges that we're seeing that we've all been going through over the last few months, having to lead and influence in a virtual environment. So with that, I am going to pass the baton back to Jeff. Most of this session is not going to be slides. It's just going to be us having a dialogue about these different topics. And the first thing I know we want to do, and Jeff, I'll leave it to you, is to start getting thoughts from everyone on the call.
Yeah. And Matt, you know, if that gig doesn't work out, you can always have a job designing slides. That's what's beautiful. So, well, I'd like to welcome everybody who just joined us. Make sure that you either participate in the chat box or speak up, as Matt said. I have a bunch of questions. We don't need to get to them all. I just want to start a discussion, and we would love to see your faces if you'll allow us to and turn on your cameras. So, question number one, because we're in turbulent times, the question is, you know, what are some of the challenges with leading and influencing in a virtual world? You know, what's different about leading change now than it was 6 or 8 months ago? And I'll start with you, Barry. Oh, you're muted. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Thanks for that, Jeff. So, you know, it's interesting. A few years ago, studies were being done about how attractive remote work is for employers and for employees. And a lot of people were very, very enthusiastic about it. But it seems as though in more recent months, the literature that's being developed around how welcoming this is when we all kind of have to, and not sure if there's going to be an option of going back or what that's going to look like, causing a lot more apprehension, it seems like, among people. So it's remarkable the I saw one of those studies even in January that was very, very positive, and now there's a lot of concern. And I think one of the things that for employers, for business leaders, one of the real concerns people are feeling is how they're going to be developing junior staff, where for so many people starting out earlier in careers, they learn the ropes by just watching what more senior people do. And when you don't have that kind of example available to you, in your bedroom, your spare bedroom, or so forth, wherever you're doing your work, there's a lot of real concern about how that kind of example is going to get, that kind of development is going to go on. So.
One of the things I've noticed just today, someone said to me, let's jump on a phone call. And I said, phone call? It's like, I don't even want to get on the phone now. I want to see their face. So yeah. I think that's just technology is a huge change as well. How about you, Conrad?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I guess I've been doing some focus groups actually internally at CGI with some from a culture assessment piece. And it was all that initially, hey, we can work from home. And then as things have set in, people have gone, whoa, okay, this was good for a while. But now that belonging and mattering and that social connection, I think, people are built for that. And even a person slightly like me, which is a bit more introverted, kind of get to the stage where I start getting a little bit of a nervous twitch, like I need to get out and see people and connect. So I think for sure is leadership be more deliberate, intentional about creating those sort of types of interactions that people can, at least at the moment, still virtually, if not, if you have it close in a city or whatever, get together. I think is so important leadership needs to be much more intentional about it.
Any of our others? Panelists?
I'll just add that I'm a change practitioner who likes to completely immerse myself in the project that I'm working on, and it's been challenging to do a sense and respond type approach to change management and to leading. It's harder to hear and understand how people are adapting to change, if they're receiving communications, if they are having an emotional response. It's been very challenging, and you don't have that hallway conversation to pick up those cues. So as the others were saying, it does require a lot of intentional communication, and sometimes you're not close to the people who you're trying to affect, so it makes it challenging.
For sure. Great, thank you. Matt?
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, the other thing I was just going to say is if everyone on the call, if you have thoughts on this topic particularly, I mean, that's what we're here to talk about today. What are the challenges you've been experiencing? What would be great? Just type in a quick note in the chat. That'll give us a whole list of topics. That'll help both for the discussion today, but it'll also help us as we tailor our sessions over the next few months with what are the challenges people are facing. We're going to always, I love how Brandy talks about sense and respond. It's such a great phrase, because that's what we want to do. We want to sense what's going on and how do we respond to it? How do we adapt? How do we improve what we're doing? So everyone, please go ahead and just type in a brief thought. What are the challenges that you've been experiencing or your team has been experiencing over the last 6 months with, most of us being virtual and being challenged and being separated from our teams and from our clients? What's that like? What are you experiencing with that?
Well, that chat box is just going crazy. So,
yeah, if I can jump in here with one comment as well. I think most of the people I work with, they've enjoyed being not having to have a commute, and they've enjoyed the work from home. A lot of the activity that we do within the software engineering field can be done easily from anywhere. What I think I've found and have struggled with as a leader is, how do I keep everyone aligned? How do I keep people moving in the same direction? So we've had to leverage more over communication and leverage tools to remind people of the direction we're going. So it was, in some ways, my job as a program manager. I've had to ramp up the level of communication and direction that I give versus when we were back in the office.
And Bruce, would you agree that it's more relationship manager than it is task manager at this point?
Oh no, for certain, and it's and I think Brandy pointed this out too. It's picking up emotional cues from your team when they're at their house and there's a dog or a cat or a child. It's sometimes hard to know what level of stress they're under versus when we're in a controlled environment in the office.
I read an article the other day that the sale of neckties is down 60% since January 1st. So I don't think I see any executives wearing neckties or even jackets anymore. So thanks to Jason Johnson, who said, you know, as an organizational communication professional, missing face-to-face information communication is huge. Eric, I love this, building and reinforcing the trust component. I think that's a topic for us, Matt, for a whole other time. But implementing change is more challenging when you can't sit down at a table and have one-to-one chat. And I think everybody's kind of shaking their heads. They agree. Yep. Liz, manager fatigue. There's something. Feeling like I have to manage much more closely with team members working remotely. I think that's what we were just talking about. It's more about a relationship now. And all of a sudden, you may not be a relationship person, but you've been forced into this, right?
Yeah, Jeff, I guess kind of along those lines, I was listening to something as well today saying about managers that were micromanagers before. You can just imagine how they're struggling in this environment, right? Their trust and respect, trying to micromanage from through a screen, really struggling with that in terms of leadership.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. This is Missy Paxton from Mylan today. Thanks for having me and inviting me. So I absolutely feel everybody on, you know, say working with micromanagers or missing that human interaction, but our whole company is becoming a new company. So it's a whole new level of change, communication. I would say for us right now, the biggest issue that we have is the lack of communication. And so we very much have an organization that has lots of questions, and they are, you know, the anxiety is up, and it's globally. It's not even just within one location. So it's a whole new company, whole new ways of working. You have a whole new leadership. I mean, we are just we're ticking all the boxes of you know, really where, you know, I'll say like people are struggling, but then also thriving. So as much as it's, you know, a turbulent time, at the same time, there are teams that are just making huge strides and plowing through and thriving, genuinely working from home. But I would say, you know, for us, the biggest challenge that we have on top of all of that is just making sure that our communication is truly messaged properly, because there can be a lot of gray area right now and a lot of people reading between the lines when really they shouldn't be.
Tiffany, let me ask you, what are you finding with productivity, with people being at home versus in the office?
Personally, I see that most people are a lot more productive, and I feel that we're almost at the point of burnout. So I can sense the fatigue. And Conrad, you brought up a really good point, and it may just be where we are in this transition, where everybody at first was gung-ho to work at home, and now it's starting to settle in, and the human interaction is, I mean, you barely have any. And people are just so focused on their work that I think that they're starting to feel that fatigue all around. And we have to be very cognizant of that. One thing that I do with my teams, I tell them, you know, I understand you have little kids at home, and I am very empathetic to that. I have dogs. So, and that's bad enough. But, you know, letting them take that break during the middle of the day. Take a jog, go to the gym, get out, go do something. Step away from the computer.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And Liz, you were the one who mentioned manager fatigue. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you would join us, I'd love to know more about what you were referring to.
Yeah, sorry I can't be on video right now, but I just find myself feeling more obligation to check in with people and really establish the expectations of due dates. Where in the office it was a little bit more casual, and now I feel forced to kind of know what everybody's working on every minute. And you know, I'm not a micromanager, but it feels like I can't always trust that I'm getting maximum, I guess, efficiency from everybody, and that might be a few individuals, but it causes quite a bit of extra work.
I noticed that Jason has given us permission to take a vacation, everyone, so go for it. after this. Brandy, how about you, productivity-wise, with your teams and your clients? Brandy Abel.
Yeah, no worries. You know, I'm super lucky to work for a company that I would just say that they have a focus on people. I have never worked for a company that's more compassionate and understanding about situations. And our CEO actually encourages us, block 4 hours in the middle of the day if you need to. Like if you've got to juggle family, kids, whatever, do that. Do walking meetings, you know, turn off the video, get outside and do as many meetings as you can outdoors while we still can. I'd say just extreme flexibility and trusting generously is a principle at Tier 1, just a guiding principle of how we operate. And we find that people want to do the right thing. Like they are leaning in as hard as they can. And when they can't, it's usually something that we can either help with or is just simply beyond their control. But just giving people more freedom almost, you know, and trusting that they're doing the right things as best as they possibly can. And if they aren't, how can we help? Just what's the best way to support?
That's great. And in the meantime, what happens, I mean, the end result is just more engagement. I think employee engagement, the better the engagement, the better the experience for our customers. You know, Missy, thank you. Our leader is hosting a wellness day this Friday. And I wonder if anybody else has any creative suggestions, like wellness days that you've done or are thinking of doing, or your CEO has done, your organization has done, to get people engaged during these times. And enter it in the chat box, or anybody?
I got a funny story. Actually, something arrived in the mail today. I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent though. We got some. CGI sent us everyone these white sunglasses, and they were saying, you know, the future is bright, and thank you for, you know, helping out get through this tough period. And also one of these little door pushers or pullers, so you don't have to touch anything. So I was kind of like, okay.
That's great.
That's interesting.
It's those little things, right? Tiffany?
We've done some happy hours. We've done some trivia days, evenings, I should say early evenings.
Happy hours, like people drinking together via Zoom?
On Zoom, yes. And it's, you know, you really don't have a lot of opportunity to do any sort of team building. But trivia works too. But it's just nice to be able to talk to people on that more personal level rather than just focus on work. So I think those are important to schedule in, some sort of team building.
I was, speaking of team building, I was doing a webinar yesterday for an international audience, just 65 people. And I asked them to change, I showed them how they can change their name on their screen and asked them to put their superhero name. And everybody did great. The two attendees from China weren't sure what I was talking about, but other than that, they did great. But there's these little things we have to adapt to, right? Missy, maybe you can explain what is involved in the Wellness Day.
Sure, I'd be more than happy to. So it's actually just a day off, and you're encouraged to spend it whatever the way that fulfills you best. So kind of like how Brandy mentioned, you know, block some days or go for a walk. I was talking with some of my colleagues earlier this week on how they are going to spend their day, and a woman that's based in India said, I'm just going to cook for my family. I'm going to cook a really good meal because that's what they're excited for. And I love that. And I thought that that's so true. So I know a pocket of people who are going to try to do a socially distanced picnic or just at least be outside to get together and or just, you know, hike, take an extra day, just take that day for you.
Thanks, Missy. Thanks for explaining that. So just take a minute in your chat box. Would you put down approximately the number of people on your team, number of people in your organization? How about just on your team? And even if you're a one-person operation, I'd love to see that. I'd just like to get an idea of the different sizes of organizations that we have represented. Sorry, Eric, I saw a company in the Boston area that's implementing a half day off per month. They've also implemented a goal to a get to know someone event. I like that. It's volunteer where people submit their names and are matched up with other people. That's great. So we've got solopreneurs, we've got 4. Organization, Missy, a big one we know. Your department is 1,700 people. Wow. 5-person, 10 people, got a few solopreneurs. So we've got the entire spectrum, it looks like. Well, that didn't narrow it down, so thanks a lot. No, that's great.
Jeff,
So I'm curious, you know, we've been focusing on employee, internal customer. Let's talk a little bit about how you're engaging your external customer now, you know, your stakeholders, your external clients. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jeff. I was just going to chip in and say this topic of context of team size and things like that reminded me about something we were talking about in preparation for this session, which was at least 3 ways to look at this topic of leadership and influence. And one of those, of course, is your team and how are you interacting with your team and leading them and influencing them and helping them to be successful. And then another, especially as people related to change, is that connection with all of your other stakeholders, whether it's senior executives or other professionals in the organization or other professionals in the client's organization. And that's obviously a wide array of stakeholders. And that's so important to think about. How do I connect with them? How do I engage with them? What am I doing to influence? But the third one that came to mind as we were having our discussions was also that topic. And I think it's worth all of us keeping this in mind of what are you doing to lead and influence yourself? How are we forming good habits? How are we taking care of ourselves? Like back to things like Missy was talking about, of taking time out, doing things that we enjoy, you know, stepping away from the keyboard, as Tiffany said. So I think that's another topic, whether we talk about it too much today or not, but worth considering that as a leader, we have at least those 3 different dimensions to consider around leadership and influence. Take care of yourself and you know, be proactive about forming good habits in this environment where you're lacking a lot of that other social support that you'd normally get in the workplace. And then also, you know, maybe back to topics of client leadership. When I was looking at some of the research into this topic of virtual leadership and virtual influence, one of the things I found was 3 ways to look at factors that influence your ability to be influential. And those 3 were basically physical separation, right? Are you nearby, close, physically proximate or not? So physical separation was one. The other, of course, was frequency of interaction. Are you interacting many times a day, once a week, once a month, whatever? And obviously that makes a big difference in your ability to be influential. And even back to Brandy's point, that sense and respond. The less frequent your interactions are, the less you can sense and respond effectively. And the final and the third sort of dimension of that was personal similarity, if you will. So people from a similar culture, a similar background, a similar profession, all those similarities help to, I guess, grease the skids for effective communication and influence. So people who are much more dissimilar to you, you need to be, as a leader, more thoughtful and proactive in how you engage with them, seek to understand them, those kinds of things. You know, account for those differences in your social situation. So there you go.
Anybody else have any thoughts externally? Have we seen business increase? Sorry?
Well, yeah, consulting, I guess, you know, we've got a client on the West Coast we're consulting with, but we've involved, CGI is huge, and we've got a dynamics team in Sweden, and getting that whole diversity and way people interact and knowing the cultural differences of Swedish, you know, interactions to our American counterparts. Myself being South African, come from a Dutch background of being pretty blunt and direct. The Swedish are a bit like that. And initially we had these first interactions with our Swedish team, putting them in front of a potential client on the West Coast. It was like, you could just see this interaction was like, okay, remember when you're interacting and leading, some of those things on who you're putting in front of who is clearly there was a bit of a clash there. So obviously taking those things into account, you know, the diversity, D&I, and all of that sort of stuff as well, I think all comes to bear.
Anybody else? Well, great. One more chat question. I asked you the size of your organization. So the question I have is, you know, would you keep working remotely? If you had the choice, Would you keep working remotely, yes or no?
You didn't give us the yes and.
Yes and. Yes and. Well, there's another answer there, and that's hybrid. So I like that answer. I think we've picked up that lexicon that word in our lexicon just from our kids from school now. So Matt, let me ask you, put you on the spot. What would hybrid look like to you?
Well, to be honest, I'm actually, speaking of kids, so I have kids, our school system is doing 2 days in school and 3 days remote each week. And that seems like a pretty good system in terms of they're getting contact time with their peers, other students, teachers, and so on. And they get time to be home, you know, to maintain social distance. So it's good from a health perspective. And it's, I think, a reasonably good balance. And I think a lot of us have found that not being in the office every day, I think maybe Bruce might have mentioned this, you know, the not having to commute, park, and all those other sort of overheads that go with being in the office, having that not be part of the workday and sort of maybe saving a couple of hours a day, that's pretty nice. The ability to focus and get our heads down and get some work done, you know, is great. And it's not bad interacting with people through Zoom or similar Teams or other kinds of systems like this. So I love being with my team. I like directly being, you know, around the table and getting through things and whiteboarding. But conversely, this isn't too bad virtual. So I personally think finding a balance would be pretty good for a lot of organizations.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like some of you have worked in that kind of model in the past anyway. So this isn't a huge change for you. Bruce, I'll put you on the spot. How about you? What hybrid, stay at home?
Yeah, no, I definitely fall into the category where I need some human contact. So currently I go in for Monday afternoon leadership meetings into Bakery Square in East Liberty. So that helps me sort of touch base with my president of my division and with others. I'm enjoying the work from home, but I do think I could ramp it up to 3 days a week in the office, 2 off, or maybe two days in the office. And then I've had to sort of round out my week. I've sort of ramped up my networking just to sort of set up my virtual coffees with people to keep that meeting and learning new people. It's been something that I've forced myself to put on my calendar. So it's definitely need the human interaction.
Great. So let's switch gears a little bit and go back to that topic of trust. You know, about building trust. And again, I want you to focus internal and external. Obviously, you know, if we're managing change in our organization, it affects both. So Barry, I'm going to ask you suggestions on building trust in a remote world.
I think the most important thing now is going to be honesty. I know dealing with clients and talking about just the issues that they're, you know, beyond when we just get past whatever it is that, you know, they wanted to talk to me about, and just kind of issues generally in the business. I think that it's easier for them to start sharing apprehensions about what's going on in the rest of the business than I would have had, you know, a few months ago. And by the way, what's interesting along those lines is that whereas a few months ago, everybody wanted to just meet, you know, like this. And so now, though, I have not one client that wants to continue to meet this way. Everybody just goes back to saying, you know, well, can you come in and sit down with us? So, but it's interesting how much easier it is for people to share apprehensions about what's going on in the rest of the business. Somebody mentioned about kind of the tea leaf reading that's going on. It seems to be much more sensitive, whether it's just because of this environment, or, you know, I guess maybe the ramifications of the pandemic on the economy. But I think that, you know, having, you know, for a lot of people, of course, those kinds of concerns, to the extent that the person they're mostly interacting with is going to be with the boss. For lots of folks, as we all know, that's not necessarily the person that you're going to want to share those kind of concerns with. So kind of figuring out, you know, not just encouraging, I think part of that challenge is not just encouraging the communication from a leader to the team members, but keeping it up between the team members as well, so that they have a chance to, you know, to vent those concerns. And of course, any manager, you know, kind of just says, you know, when you get a chance to ask those questions, so how do you think things are going? You know, you can kind of get those more reliable feelings from some of those folks willing to share that. So
Great. Anyone else on that?
I'll just share two thoughts. One is trust generously. I think one of the most effective ways of creating an environment of trust, virtually or in person, is trusting people yourself. And I think the second is, you know, Brene Brown's concept of, you know, what is the most generous assumption I can make about this situation? So assume positive intent. And I think especially virtually, it's so easy to kind of lose track of why somebody's doing something or why they're asking questions. And the more you can, again, lean into that and give just the most generous possible view of why someone's doing that, I think that helps to build trust with your team internally or externally.
Yeah, also, I mean, that piece around clarity, accountability, expectations, I think often is the problem, right? If people are not very clear on what's expected of them, when, how, and it's communicated very clearly, I think then there's that step of micro, oh, well, why aren't they doing that? If people know exactly what they need to do, but then they also have that feedback loop and that trust, hopefully it's a two-way thing, care and love and trust your people, got to get that back, but you have to have that clarity and communication. So I think it's the whole circular, virtuous circle, not vicious circle.
You know, when you're talking about communication, I think the first thing that every organization should do is teach their people how to look when they're using Zoom. You know, I've seen up more nostrils and not being able to see people because of the background lighting than ever before. So that's a big point as well. You know, let's talk about communication for a minute, because I mean, obviously influence, leadership is about communication. And I'm going to go back. I apologize. I didn't scroll back to see who said it, but somebody said, you know, without the ability to facial expressions and gestures and everything else, you know, how do we, this thing called communication is tied to trust as well. I think I've seen studies, whether they're true or not, it gets the point across that if there's only three things that make us a great communicator, it's our tone of voice, our words we use, and our body language being number one, and words being, you know, way down there. So it's not about what we say, it's how we say it. At least that is in person. I'm wondering if that's changing. I mean, and no offense to the people who aren't putting on their cameras, but now we don't have the advantage of seeing them. So, you know, if they were participating in a meeting, it would just be the words they use. So I'm curious how we get past that. I mean, if we're not going back to work for a while, how do we communicate? How does a leader communicate effectively? Okay.
I think one of the things that that really hones true, and it's very fundamental, but if you say you're going to communicate something by the end of the week, do it. So it's really adding that accountability piece, because when you don't do it, that's when that anxiety really starts to muster up in people. So that's really the kind of the first thing that came to my mind.
Todd, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you mind unmuting for a minute and just sharing that thought that you wrote and a little bit about that?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, honestly, you know, I've been working in the virtual environment now for several years because I was a part of a remote team at a previous employer. One of the things that I enjoyed being on the remote team was that a lot of times the first question out of someone's mouth in a meeting like this is, how are you? What's going on with your life, with your family, etc. Just really getting to know me as a person. It really helps to bridge the gap when you don't have the face-to-face interaction, that you're actually learning about the people that you're working with or working for.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for adding that.
Sure.
And Eric, you know, Eric talks about setting baseline expectations for people, and it's more about the deliverables. So I'm gonna go back to Matt again, because you know, you're a project manager and it's all about deliverables. So I'm curious, is that really the gauge now versus communication?
That's really the only important thing, Jeff. I mean, really, crush the people, get the deliverables out the door, and it's all good. That's how we
Thank you.
operate.
Let's move on.
No, it's fair enough. Yes, project management is there on the list. But it's actually a really good point in the sense that a good project manager, it's about the intent of what you're trying to achieve together as a team. So that as a leader or as a PM or whatever your role is, the focus on what are we trying to get done together? What is our greater mission? Simon Sinek, start with why, that kind of thing. If we can continually reinforce that communication and say, this is what we're doing, this is what we're striving to achieve, this is the difference it's going to make, this is the meaning behind it, and rally people behind that. It's another principle in Agile, which is don't tell people what to do, but help them understand very clearly what you're trying to achieve together. So I think that's really important, and that's often missing because a leadership team or a leader may believe they've communicated because they said it once in a meeting, or they sent an email, or they did something else, maybe once, maybe twice. But we've learned that effectively communicating a message like that of what is our priority, what are our principles, must be continually reinforced over time until you feel that you've said it far too much. And then you're probably about right. So I think that's important to keep in mind.
Excellent. I'm going to defer to Jay's question here. He says, speaking of accountability, how do companies continue to operate, hold themselves accountable, and measure productivity, but without implementing arbitrary metrics and or draconian policies? I can't read it barely, so I'm not answering. Anybody want to tackle that? And Jay, if you have some thoughts, please unmute yourself.
Sure. So, the reason I have that question is because, I'm sure everyone's been hearing or reading all these articles about companies trying to figure out how best to measure things now that people aren't just, butts in seats. You don't just see someone come in at 9, check out at 5, and assume that everyone just does the work that they do. Even though the world hasn't changed that much in terms of, getting work done. We're all going to work and doing things, but it just feels like, in the world before, if you call it that, everyone just went about their day and, you just assume everyone gets everything done. Now that, we don't see each other on a daily basis, there's suddenly like, this odd level of suspicion that maybe folks aren't doing everything they're supposed to be doing. Whether or not the work is being done, there's still this kind of, I guess there's a lack of trust in some ways. It's a really good word, trust. And, all of a sudden some companies are, going to certain lengths. Draconian is what I thought of, companies who install spyware and other things into employee computers. I'm sure most companies don't do that, but that's just the most extreme case. But I'm just curious to get people's thoughts on that. And it's something that's been on my mind a little bit, and I've heard from some of my friends in their companies, and it's not really something that the average employee, I feel like, can do anything about, but it's certainly a big question for managers and executives and corporate leadership.
So Jay, let me just ask you, do you think people are more accountable in this environment or less accountable than they were before?
I mean, I think that's a really good question. It all depends on how you go about, how you go about measuring that. For my team, we have regular team syncs. I actually feel like I have more meetings than I used to when I was going to an office physically. So I actually do feel like in terms of contacts and in terms of interactions with folks, I'm interacting with people and getting stuff done much more than I kind of was at the office. More often than not, I was walking around and interacting with folks and just kind of like, getting to know folks and, asking them about their day, and less so getting work done in person with them. So now it's kind of, we have a lot more quiet time to work, and I feel like a lot of people they appreciate the time they get to interact with folks when there is time for it.
I personally find people more accountable only because they're being put on the spot in front of everybody else. You know, what did you produce? What did you get this done? Whereas before I could just walk into your cubicle or your office and it's just one-to-one. So I'm curious. Anybody else want to address this?
So I've got a thought, Jeff. So if we step back and look at the macro view, we've gone into a deep retraction of the economy. So I think what I'm sensing, and I feel this sometimes too, is that yes, we're holding ourselves accountable, but we're also sort of inching toward the burnout as well, because we don't want to be the next person at the bottom of the list who gets the pink slip. And so I think in some ways, we haven't quite found the happy medium. I know in my life, I'm probably still burning a little hot at this point, but I do think that people are individually holding themselves accountable, mainly out of a fear of getting the RIF list at this point.
Tiffany, you had a thought?
I think most people want to do the right thing. And I think that you have to trust them to do it. Daily stand-ups work really well. It's just the classic 3 questions. What did you finish? What are you working on today? And do you have any blocks or obstacles? And that goes a long way just to see where everybody is progressing without being like big brother over somebody or micromanaging them. But I honestly feel in the environment that I'm in that people are much more productive. There's a lot more involvement on teams. People are volunteering, and it might go back to exactly what Bruce just said, because I can definitely empathize with that feeling as well. But I think we just have to trust people to do the right thing. And I don't know if we necessarily have to change our metrics to do that. Maybe it's just conversations.
Like the trust but verify. But I think, I mean, my mind always comes back to what would have been done in the pre-COVID days. If people have clarity of what they need to do, so goal setting, but not on an annual basis, which is too far out. So the typical performance management agreed with, you know, your supervisor, wherever, you know exactly what you need to do by when, and obviously raise if there's any concerns. But that's very clear. And then you have these daily check-ins so that, you know, people don't get left behind and it's too late at some stage. That feedback loop again is, if, you know, people clear what they need to do by when and why are they doing it. It's tied back to hopefully some vision, mission, why the success of what they're doing actually matters. That whole circle again, for me, is the key.
Mm-hmm. Barry?
You know, there's 2 things that come to mind on this. Going back to Jay's question, you know, Gallup had done a study a few years back, and of about 20,000 employees in a couple hundred companies around the world. And one of their significant findings was that roughly half of all employees do not actually know what's expected of them at work. So when you think about that in this kind of a context, you know, I think your question, Jay, takes on a real sense of urgency. And so related to that, talking about to the extent we're getting into kind of, you know, draconian policies, to the extent that somebody might think of, you know, workplace monitoring going on, or, you know, monitoring of computers. I could just tell you, having been involved in those decisions for various reasons, just because your company hasn't announced it's going on, don't assume it's not. So hopefully they're not taking control of your camera, because that would be, that's illegal. But presumably, if they've got a policy that says that they can do workplace monitoring, they could be doing it as we're here right now, and they don't have to tell you. So
Barry is our
like anybody needs to be a little paranoid right now, but just thought I'd offer that.
Barry is our HR guru, so yeah, we take it as gospel. That's great. Anybody else want to?
I'll just add a couple things. I think every action and interaction builds your reputation, and you don't want to be that person who lets your team down. And so what I think the role of the leader is making sure you're giving feedback to people, that if they are having a series of actions or interactions that are creating a reputation that is negative, that somebody's telling that person that early enough for them to adjust. And I think that really helps. So it's not necessarily like managing the work that they do every day, but when you start seeing a pattern of behavior that you feel is leading them down a path that you know they don't want to go, you know, do the loving thing and tell them that and help them get back on track.
Excellent advice. So I'm curious, take a little bit of a turn, but I'd love to know, maybe in the chat box and for our panelists, what facilitation tools have you used, and for better or for worse? Besides, we know obviously we're on Zoom, but there's Teams, there's everything else. What have you used? Would you put it in the chat box that, or you are using? Any other facilitation? And this is a great opportunity to teach people about them as well. Forgive me, I see Miro or Miro. I'm not sure which it is. Bruce, can you just speak quickly to that one so I don't have to say it again?
Okay, so yeah, Miro or Mural is another one. These are
Mural.
large virtual whiteboards that teams can use. Don't believe there is an equivalent in Teams, but it's hard when we were all very used to using whiteboards in our office and referring to them and pointing to them, and then moving to a virtual space is somewhat helpful, but it doesn't fully replace the physical nature of a whiteboard in an office.
And Brandy, maybe you want to mention Menti?
Yeah, so Menti is great. You can either use it as a website or a plugin to PowerPoint, but it allows you to do real-time polling and different ways of displaying information. It can be word bubbles, it can be pie charts, it can be kind of voting, and it shows as people respond to it what those results are. So it's just a great way. It can take 30 seconds, you know, a minute to do in the middle of a presentation, and just encourages people to interact. And
I had never heard of it, but you used it with us when we were forming the organization. And I mean, it's everything from using sticky notes to, it just seemed very practical and easy to use.
I think using Menti, the beauty of it as well is when people in session, they're using their phones. So very easily they type in stuff with the code, which is nice. They don't have to have any software running while you're in session on.
Oh. Did he freeze for everybody or just me?
Yeah, you froze it a little, Connor.
You froze there, Connor. Can you?
Did you not hear what I said? I was saying using your phone for Mentimeter. At least you don't have to put any software. You don't have to run any software on the session, the go-to-meeting or whatever it is. Zoom, you can just pick up and respond. So that works really well. Menti, why it works well. Yeah.
Matt, how about you? You mentioned a few things.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things overall that we talked about around some of the dimensions of influence was this use of technology, and there's so many different applications. So obviously meetings is one thing, asynchronous collaboration is important. So things like SharePoint Teams, things like that. And what I would say again, as a leader, is make sure to work with your team to actually adopt these tools and use them well. And basically, I would say don't tolerate people sort of abstaining, because you've got to figure out how to replace the physical environment. And so these tools can be really helpful. And there's so many different things you can do, like polling, like virtual whiteboarding, like document authoring altogether, those kinds of things. So, you know, that might itself be a really interesting topic for us to explore in the future, is what are those different facets of helping to run change and helping to lead. What are the tooling options that we can consider? Because even from a categorical perspective, what are sort of ways that you might need to do things? And then what are some tools that can help you with those ways of getting work done?
Excellent. Well, we're coming to a close already. And I'm going to put Barry Wolf on the spot again with one more question, and then we can get some feedback from others. But Barry, have you seen, I'd like to know how recruiting and onboarding has kind of been affected by our situation now, or has it?
Well, there's the really fascinating section that'll be, this group will be here to, will be thrilled to hear about how you can now virtually verify Section 2 of an I-9 online. So isn't that remarkable? But anyway, other than that, I think that, you know, the technology actually for a lot of businesses has made some leaps and bounds in relatively recent years. And I think a lot of companies are going towards online solutions as part of a talent management suite. And so a lot of that work's being done really before you start, and from getting things kind of signed up to, you know, allowing further interactions regarding, you know, introducing the culture and setting up buddy systems, things like that. So, I mean, from what I have seen among other clients and seen around the world, I don't know that they're actually, I think a lot of companies are taking onboarding in stride to this point. So.
Great. Anybody else want to speak to that end of things? That's a good way to end, and I think a better way to.
Yeah, I suppose just a little comment.
Sorry.
Oh. Sorry, can you hear me? Am I breaking up still?
Yep, you're
We
good.
can hear you.
You can hear me. Just on the hiring note, I think obviously for people that are going to potentially be more virtual, I think it changes your perspective or the kind of characteristics that you may look for in people. So generally the people that thrive in the remote environment would want things like flexibility and autonomy. So the idea of social butterflies that wanted to wander around the office, that maybe doesn't work so well in a virtual environment.
Yeah. I totally agree, and I think that people, this is my observation with my clients, is that they're hiring more for a cultural fit than they are to skill, and I think that's a good thing. And it's also a great segue. Matt, maybe you can show the last slide, because let me just say that our next meeting is October. Thank you, by the way, to all of our panelists and everybody who participated. You can give yourselves a hand. It's kind of virtual, but thank you, and thank you for everybody. We have an international audience. You know, I know we've got Canada represented, South Africa, Australia, even California. So, that's not what I was expecting. Do you want to?
No, that's okay. I'm going to flip to the next one. But what I did want to do, just to put this up briefly, Jeff, was just in the dialogue we had been having before the meeting, was like just to consider some of these topics. I think we covered all of these pretty well, except I think for topic 4, which was that sort of investment in people, the investment in teams, because that's another characteristic of leadership and influence, that you don't want to just be, you know, current and sort of dealing with the day. You also want to be thinking about how your leadership and influence affects long-term investment and development of teams and organizational capability. So that can be a topic for another day. I just wanted to leave this up briefly so people can have that as a point of reference in the recording. What I'll do is I'll jump forward to our next, which is we had our discussion, so that was good. But as you said, our next event. So Jeff, if you would introduce us to
I am very excited to introduce a friend of mine, and one of the best speakers that I know. Richard Haddon is the author of Contented Cows Give Better Milk. He focuses on leadership and employee engagement. His newest topic is Leading from a Distance. He's going to present that. Richard is in Jacksonville, Florida, has agreed to join us. And I thought it was the 15th, Matt, or maybe we want to check that again. I think
that's easily fixable.
Okay. Yeah, I believe it's October 15th. Please join us for Richard Haddon's presentation. And if I can, again, thank you to everybody for being here. I just want to give Tiffany credit, because I think she had the chat of the day with her last one, and that is that laughs are necessary. Do we need to say anything more, Matt?
No, other than just this last piece of, please do visit us on the website and or the LinkedIn group, join up, ask us questions through that format. And we really do hope to see everyone again, and bring a friend if you come again next time. Thanks. And thanks to the team. This was great to pull this together, and looking forward to growing the group and growing the community over the next few months and years.
Perfect. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks all.